Today's topic at Medical Sciences, we want to look at the human heart. We're going to look at the structure of the human heart, where it is located, then the different layers of the human heart and their functions. So, the human heart, by definition, is the muscular organ. It is a muscular organ which is responsible for pumping blood. So its major role is pumping blood, whereby it pumps blood via blood vessels, where blood vessels include veins, arteries, and capillaries. So that is what we can call a human heart. And this heart is located in the mediastinum. It is located within the mediastinum. So the location it is found within the mediastinum. It is found within the mediastinum, and that is in the chest region. So within the chest region, we are seeing the heart is located more on the right, more on the left, in between two lungs. So it is found within, in between. It is between two lungs, the right and the left hand, and the right and the left lungs. And these lungs, that's where we find the heart in between, but more on the left side. That is where we can see the location within the chest region. And it is, of course, since it is a vital organ in the body, it is protected by the ribs. And this heart we are talking about, it measures between 12 centimeters. That is the measurements. So after seeing what the human heart is, after seeing the location which is found within the mediastinum and is found within between the two lungs in the chest region, measuring 12 centimeters. So the next thing we can look at is different parts of the human heart. And the human heart is made up of the right, we have the right atrium. This is the right atrium. Then we are going to find the right ventricle. This is the right ventricle. Then this is the left atrium and the left ventricle. So these are the four chambers. So it is made up of four chambers. That is the right atrium, left atrium, right ventricle, and left ventricle. So these are the four chambers of the human heart. And these chambers are supplied by different blood vessels, as we have said, whereby the right part is having deoxygenated blood. This deoxygenated blood comes via the inferior. This is the inferior vena cava. Inferior vena cava, and another one comes through superior vena cava. Then they meet at the common vena cava. Then this deoxygenated blood enters via the right atrium. Then from the right atrium, via the bicuspid valves. This is the bicuspid. No, this one we call the tricuspid. Tricuspid valve. Then it is able to move to the right ventricles. This is deoxygenated blood, full of carbon dioxide. And after coming via the inferior and the superior vena cava, then it enters into the right atrium, which is pumped via the tricuspid valve to the right ventricle. And after filling the right ventricle, this blood is pumped through the pulmonary artery. This is the pulmonary artery. And this pulmonary artery branches into the left pulmonary artery and the right pulmonary artery. And this is the only artery that carries deoxygenated blood. So we're going to see that this pulmonary artery is going to transport deoxygenated blood to the left lung and the right lung via the right pulmonary artery and the left pulmonary artery. So this is the role of the pulmonary artery, whereby it transports blood from the right ventricle to the left lung and the right lung via the left pulmonary artery and left pulmonary vein, both the right and the left, so that this blood which is lacking oxygen is taken to the two lungs so that to pick up oxygen. And after picking up oxygen, this blood which is oxygenated is brought back into the heart via the pulmonary vein. So pulmonary vein, there are two of them from the two lungs, that is the right and the left, and bring back this oxygenated blood into the left atrium. Then when it is filled, it contracts and sends this oxygenated blood to the left ventricle. This is the oxygenated blood, the blood full of oxygen. This one is full of carbon dioxide, so it is deoxygenated. And after filling, you can appreciate that the right ventricle has a thin wall, whereas the left has thick muscular wall. And this difference in the size is because the left ventricle pumps blood to a longer distance via the aorta to the rest of the parts of the body, whereas the right ventricle is thin-walled because it pumps blood near the heart, that is to the two lungs, so there is not much energy needed, whereas the left, pumping blood to the rest of the body parts, it is thicker to withstand or to create enough pressure to pump blood to the rest of the body parts. So this saturation is what is divided into two. We have what we call pulmonary saturation and systemic saturation, whereby pulmonary saturation is short because this one is pumping blood to the lungs to pick up oxygen, whereas systemic is taking blood to the body parts, to the whole body parts. And this pulmonary saturation begins with the blood coming via the superior and the inferior vena cava. So this one deals with deoxygenated. It deals with deoxygenated blood. Then this one deals with oxygenated blood. So these are the two saturations that we have in the body. What is pulmonary saturation? This is whereby the oxygenated blood from the body parts is brought back to the heart via the vena cava, that is superior and inferior, through the right atrium to the right ventricle, and then it is pumped to the lungs to pick up oxygen through the pulmonary artery, both the left and the right. That is what we call pulmonary saturation. Whereas systemic saturation, we are going to see that blood, after picking up oxygen from the right and the left lung, is going to come back via the pulmonary vein, then into the left atrium, then via the bicuspid valve, then to the left ventricle. And from the left ventricle, it pumps this blood via the aorta. So this is the aorta. And this aorta has the valve known as the semilunar valve, or you can call them aortic valve, that prevents the backflow of blood. So via the aortic valve, then to the rest of the body parts. That is what we call systemic circulation, receiving blood, oxygenated blood from the lungs to the left atrium, the left ventricle via the bicuspid valve, then to the aorta via the aortic valve, then to the rest of the body parts to supply oxygen. That is what we are calling systemic saturation. So after looking at how blood flows, coming from this side into this side, then to the lungs, then from the lungs back to here, then to the rest of the body parts via the aorta. Now we need to know the different walls. After we have seen its location, if I can come and zoom this point here, I cut a small portion and I zoom it here, I'm going to find out that this human heart, the outer covering, which anchors it in the mediastinum, is what we call the pericardium. So this one it has the pericardium. It is surrounded by the pericardium. And this pericardium is made up of two layers, whereby it has two layers, one known as the parietal. It has one layer which is known as the fibrous layer. Then it has the fibrous layer, and this fibrous layer is the one we are seeing at this portion. This is the fibrous layer of the pericardium. Then it has also the inner serous layer. It has the serous layer. So these two layers of the pericardium, we have seen that the outer one, which is the fibrous layer, this one is made up of the dense tissue. It is made up of dense connective tissue, and these dense connective tissue are made up of inelastic fibers. It is inelastic, and it is the one that prevents overstretching of the heart. It prevents overstretching of the heart. That is the fibrous tissue. But apart from preventing the overstretching, it is also responsible for protective function. It protects the heart from any damage, and as if it is not enough, it also anchors the heart into the mediastinum. It anchors the heart. So the heart within the mediastinum, what prevents it from overstretching during pumping of blood is this fibrous layer, which is part of the pericardium. Then we said this fibrous layer is made up of dense inelastic connective tissue. And this connective tissue are the one that prevents overstretching of the cardiac muscle, protects it from any damage, and also anchors it firmly within the mediastinum. That is what we can talk about, three functions of the fibrous layer. And after looking at the fibrous layer, we have the serous layer. And this serous layer is made up of two layers also, whereby it has the parietal. It has the parietal layer and the visceral. And the visceral layer. And this parietal layer is the outer. This is the outer layer. Then the visceral is the inner. And in between the parietal and the visceral, we find the fluid known as the pericardial fluid. So the pericardial fluid is found in between the parietal, which is the outer layer, and the visceral, which is the inner. And this pericardial fluid is found in the pericardium cavity. So within here, if we have this as the fibrous, and then this is the serous layer, then this is the fibrous. In between the serous layer, we are having the parietal layer, then this is the visceral. The visceral layer. And in between the visceral layer, we are seeing pericardial fluid. It has the pericardial fluid within the pericardium cavity. And this pericardial fluid is produced by the cells found in the visceral region, and these cells are known as mesothelium. Mesothelium, or these epithelial cells found within the visceral, are the one that produces this thin fluid. And this thin fluid, its responsibility is to prevent friction. It prevents friction during contraction and relaxation of the heart. So that is the function of the serous layer, having the parietal and the visceral, in between having the pericardial fluid, which prevents friction during contraction and relaxation of the heart muscle. So this is what we can talk about the serous layer of the pericardium. And after looking at the pericardium, the same at this point, this which we are calling the visceral, we can also call it the epicardium. You can also call it the epicardium, because it's the outer layer of the cardiac muscle. Then after the epicardium, we are going to have the myocardium. This is the myocardium. Then the inner one is the endocardium. So these are the three layers of the heart muscles, whereby the first one is the epicardium, the second one is the myocardium, and the third one is the endocardium. And these heart muscles are covered by the pericardial layer, made up of the fibrous and the serous, which protects it from any danger. So this epicardium, which is the same as the visceral layer, we have seen it contains the cells that produce thin fluid called the pericardial fluid. Then from there we go to the myocardium, and this myocardium is made up of the myosin, the actin, the intercalated discs, and so forth. And these muscles are the one that is responsible for contraction. It is responsible for contraction. It also contains other parts which are responsible for conduction. So that is the myocardium, made up of the contractile part of the muscles. And this is what we are seeing as the myocardium. Then the inner lining, we are calling it the endocardium. The endocardium is the one that makes the inside of the heart muscles smooth, and also produces the valves, the heart valves, the bicuspid, the tricuspid, then the pulmonary valves and the aortic valve are continuous of the endocardium. And this endocardium is the one that forms the endothelial layer of blood vessels where the blood flows through. So these are the three layers of the heart: epicardium, myocardium, and endocardium. Epicardium containing cells that produce the fluid, which we are calling the pericardial fluid, that prevents friction. Then the myocardium containing the contractile muscles, the actin, the myosin, and the intercalated discs. Those are the striated muscles. Then even containing the conduction parts, that is the sinoatrial node, the AVN, band of His, and the Purkinje fibers, which are responsible for conduction of the heart. Then we have seen the endocardium containing smooth muscles. It is a smooth layer that it is continuous with the blood vessels and forms part of the valves of the heart that prevents backflow of blood. So this is what we can discuss with you about the anatomy or the structure and function of the heart. And one of the clinical correlations we can discuss with you in this video is that any problem with the pericardial cavity can lead to what we call pericarditis. pericarditis, which is inflammation of the pericardial fluid or the pericardial cavity. It is the inflammation of the pericardial cavity. And this inflammation is either due to bacterial infection or viral infection, which can be treated. And another one is there is also myocarditis. That is inflammation of the myocardium. We can even see endocarditis. Endocarditis, that is inflammation of the endocardium. These inflammations are brought about by infections like bacterial or viral infections. And this one can even result into rheumatic fever, which destroys the valves, and it is majorly caused by Streptococcus species. Then another condition we can look at is myocardial infarction, or what we call heart attack. And this myocardial infarction is due to hypoxia, whereby hypoxia is lack of oxygen, and this lack of oxygen leads to ischemia, and ischemia can lead to infarct or death of the muscle or the cardiac muscles of the heart, which can lead to heart attack. And this myocardial infarction can be treated by drugs like streptokinase, drugs like heparin. Those are the anticoagulants we can use in treatment of this myocardial infarction. Lastly, another condition we can see which affects the heart and anatomy is angina pectoris. And angina pectoris is also due to hypoxia, which is characterized by sharp chest pain. And this angina pectoris is majorly due to lack of oxygen supply, either when there is a blockage of the great veins that supplies oxygen on the myocardium. So these are the clinical correlations we can talk about within this video. Thank you so much for learning with us from the beginning until the end. We're always privileged to serve you. Always recommend me more so that we can continue to grow. Thank you so much.